Hello, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, Israel's bringing in Lieberman as the new defense minister. Belgium nominates a jailed terrorist for the Nobel Peace Prize. And we take a look at how Israelis are surviving the country's rising housing prices. I'm Denise Wood here with the latest news in Israel. The Israeli government is going through a major political shakeup, and it looks like Avigdor Lieberman's Yisrael Beitenu party will be joining Prime Minister Netanyahu's government. Lieberman will replace current Defense Minister Moshe Ya'alon, and Netanyahu is expected to offer Ya'alon the vacant post of Minister of Foreign Affairs. Both moves come as a surprise, since the center-left Zionist Union Party leader Isaac Herzog has been in talks to join Netanyahu's government. But that deal broke down in recent days, and now Lieberman's party will be joining instead. Israel Beitenu will add 6 Knesset seats and grow Netanyahu's coalition majority from 61 seats to 67 seats. The deal isn't done yet, but Netanyahu and Lieberman have had several rounds of discussions and agreed to appoint negotiating teams to nail down the remaining details. The move definitely comes as a surprise. And up until yesterday, everyone thought a coalition between Netanyahu and Lieberman was very unlikely, because the former foreign minister has been extremely critical of Netanyahu. But yesterday afternoon, Lieberman announced that they were in negotiations, and says his party is demanding the defense portfolio, support for the death penalty for convicted terrorists, and a resolution of the pension issue for Israelis from the former Soviet Union. Lieberman and Netanyahu definitely have a lot of history. They ran for government on a joint list in the 2013 elections, but had a public falling out in 2014, and Lieberman has remained a sharp critic of the prime minister ever since. Members of Netanyahu's Likud party have already begun criticizing Lieberman's appointment as defense minister, especially since he lacks military experience, which is usually a prerequisite for Israeli defense ministers. Likud MK Benny Begin is calling Lieberman's appointment delusional and irresponsible. And a poll held by Israel's Walla news site found that only 29% of Israelis think Lieberman should be appointed to the role. The breakdown of coalition talks has left the Zionist Union in turmoil, and party leader Isaac Herzog says backstabbing in his own party convinced Prime Minister Netanyahu to leave them out of the coalition. Party leader Isaac Herzog is now lashing out at party colleague Shelly Yacimovich and accusing her of running a filthy campaign against him. Herzog's also blaming both Yacimovich and Prime Minister Netanyahu for the failure of the coalition talks. Herzog claims he and Prime Minister Netanyahu had made a lot of progress in talks, but Netanyahu refused to put the agreements in writing. Herzog's now saying Netanyahu missed a historic opportunity to stand together in an attempt to reach a breakthrough in the peace process.
מדינת ישראל ואזרחי ישראל יצטרכו להתמודד עם ממשלה שכעת מדיניותה היא על סף הטירוף, ואת זאת ניסיתי לעצור.
But it turns out Herzog says Yacimovich is even more to blame, claiming her constant backstabbing signaled a split in the Zionist Union and led Netanyahu to seek a more stable partner for the coalition. And it looks like Herzog might not be the only one disappointed about the development. Reports are now claiming that British Prime Minister Tony Blair, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, and Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi were behind the push for Herzog to join Netanyahu's government in hopes of restarting the peace process. Israel's Haaretz newspaper claims Blair has been visiting the region every 2 to 3 weeks for the last several months, and even held meetings with Netanyahu and Herzog. Reports say Kerry also helped with the efforts, but it looks like the plan has failed. It's unclear who exactly is to blame, but it appears that Herzog is pointing a finger at his own party. We're talking a lot today about how Israel's going through a major political transition, and in a surprise move, Yisrael Beitenu is joining the coalition. Until yesterday, it seemed more likely that the Zionist Union would join Prime Minister Netanyahu's government. ILTV sat down with top political scientist Dr. Avrohom Diskin to talk about all these changes and what caused them.
It can work, and it worked in the past, and I think, the Camp David Accord and the peace agreement with Egypt is really the best example of how things can work in spite of the fact that you don't have a majority within your own Knesset faction.
Well, let's look at the Zionist Union led by Isaac Herzog. It's actually a combination of the Labour Party and Hatanua. Most of its Knesset members are well to the left of the current coalition. Could you see that party splitting, with some following Herzog into the coalition and others deciding to split off and sit out?
First of all, I have to say that there is a difference between what people say openly and what they really believe in and want. There is a great gap between the two. And actually, I had a couple of meetings with someone very close to Herzog, and I presented that question. I said, well, you're going to lose most of your faction, and we have also to say that the Labour Party today does include very, I would say, extreme people to the left, very dovish people, extremely socialist people, etc. So it's not going to be that easy. So when I presented that to the person close to Herzog, he said, well, it's all a matter of jobs, at the end of the road. So if the leading people are going to get, their share and their influence, I'm not saying that people are only after jobs, they also are after influence. If you're going to get, a ministry where you can shape policies, etc., you can overcome that. Now, so it's really a matter, what is on the table, what's in there for people personally and policy-wise. That's really the main question.
Well, what about within the Likud? There's reportedly some friction between Prime Minister Netanyahu and Defense Minister Moshe Ya'alon. The Prime Minister recently called in Ya'alon for consultation after he didn't like something that he had said. And Ya'alon is very unpopular within the Likud. Is it possible that Netanyahu is looking to push Ya'alon out in order to make room for broadening his coalition and offering the defense ministry to someone else?
First of all, we don't know what kinds of tricks people have in their own mind. I really don't know. But I believe that actually Netanyahu and Ya'alon are very close to each other concerning policy. And they do work together quite successfully. We saw that under very, I would say, demanding circumstances, like the last operation in Gaza, etc. But always there is a rivalry. Ya'alon is popular amongst the most important potential voters in Israel, and these are the voters in the center. That's really what they decide the elections. Who is attractive to people at the center? And Ya'alon is definitely there, because, after all, he came from the Labour Party. After all, his belief is summarized in the book that he wrote, A Long, Short Way. I am for all the concessions possible. We cannot make it right now, okay? So that's my goal. I'm really, the bottom line is that I'm a dovish person, but I'm also a realistic person. So I think that that's where there are differences. I also believe that, people have all kinds of calculations, who is going to be in what job, if there is a change in the government, etc. We are not there yet. And basically, I must say once again, I think that Netanyahu and Ya'alon, if you talk about ideology, if you talk about basic policies, are very close to each other. And they prove to work successfully together more than once in the last few years.
Belgium has made another series of moves to get on Israel's bad side. The Belgian government has just turned down a request for financial assistance from the daughters of an Israeli couple killed in a Belgian terror attack in 2014. But that's not all. Now, Belgian lawmakers from across the political spectrum are nominating a jailed Palestinian for the Nobel Peace Prize. Fatah leader Marwan Barghouti is currently serving 5 life sentences in an Israeli jail for his role in several murderous terror attacks during the Second Intifada. He was convicted in 2004 on 5 counts of murder, and is known as the founder of the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade. Palestinian activists have been campaigning for him to be nominated for the Nobel Prize since April, and now Belgian lawmakers are joining the cause. Officials from both the Belgian Senate and House of Representatives have penned a letter to the Nobel Nominating Committee, praising Barghouti as a peace activist and the key to future peace talks between Israel and the Palestinians. Meanwhile, 2 Israeli teenage girls have been denied help from the Belgian government after their parents were killed in an attack on the Jewish Museum in Brussels. Mira and Emmanuel Riva were on vacation touring the museum in 2014, when a jihadist-trained terrorist opened fire at the site and murdered them. The Riva teens have filed an application for financial assistance from the Belgian government, which is generally provided without question. Yet the teens have been refused aid, under the pretense that they have no urgent need for the funds. The U.S. elections are drawing closer, and a new poll by Fox News shows that Donald Trump would beat Hillary Clinton if the elections were held today. While they continue to fight for votes, we're taking a look at both candidates' views on Israel and who would be better for the Jewish state. The polls say Trump would receive 45% of the vote, and Clinton would only receive 42% if the elections were held today. Even though the elections will be held in the U.S., Israelis are closely watching to see the turnout, and many have begun to ask which candidate would be the best for Israel. A few weeks ago, Trump had planned to visit Israel and meet with Prime Minister Netanyahu, but canceled the visit to avoid pressuring the Prime Minister over choosing one of the U.S. candidates. Trump has previously said he thinks he and Netanyahu would get along well, and the Republican frontrunner recently came out in support of continuing to build Israeli settlements. On the other hand, Democratic frontrunner Hillary Clinton has also come out in strong support of Israel, and her husband, former U.S. President Bill Clinton, recently made headlines for saying he tried to give the Palestinians a peace deal, but they wouldn't accept it. Bill Clinton's comments came in response to those who were criticizing Hillary for supporting the Jewish state. While the candidates continue to fight for America's votes, it looks like at least they agree on their support for Israel. Israel features a wide variety of music, and Israelis still love to listen to past Israeli musicians. But it can be difficult to find information about some of the country's most loved artists that have already passed away. Israeli music historian Dudi Patimer started a project to research past Israeli musicians and share their stories through modern technology. He's here with us today to tell us more. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you.
So first of all, how did you decide to start with this project?
It started about 5 years ago. I was a soldier and I wanted to know more about Israeli music and musicians especially. So I saw there's a leak of information. So I decided I want to fill this leak, and I started to interview musicians from all kinds of generations, new, old, and lots of styles, like, classic, jazz, rock.
Sure.
And that's how the project began.
So we know you research these artists, but what do you do with that research?
First of all, I record every musician I interview. And second of all, I put it on my site, blog, do the paid, I called him. And there's rare photos, rare recordings, musical recordings, and everyone can watch it.
So this is basically people can actually go to your blog and listen to these artists' music, correct?
Listen to them talk also, and to read their story.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So how many artists would you say you've interviewed so far?
So far about 4,000.
Wow.
Yes, but on my site there are 1,200, sort of.
Sure, still work in progress.
Yeah.
Are all of these artists famous from Israel's past, or some of them are less well known?
Some of them are unknown, totally unknown, but I don't pay attention if he's famous or not. Everyone should be documented.
Sure. Is the goal to research pretty much every artist that Israel's ever had, or what is your goal, like, in terms of researching them?
I don't have a term, from the 1920s until now, but my biggest goal is to write the encyclopedia of every Israeli player in Israel.
Fantastic. Yeah. Now, I have to ask, do you have a favorite artist that you've interviewed or researched about?
I can't answer that. I don't want to mess with somebody. But every artist has his own special story, so everyone is special.
What's one story maybe that touched you more than others? Not more, just touched you in particular.
Okay, there are stories like I went to interview Israel Izraki. He was a very famous pop star in the 50s, and now he's 19
Wow.
Yeah, he was in a hospital, and no one came to visit him. So I came to interview him, to show him respect, and that's what excites me. There is another story, like I went to interview an old singer, Israeli singer, and she was Alzheimer's, so she didn't remember she was a singer,
Wow.
But I came with a player, a guitar player, and as he played, she remembered every song she sang.
Wow.
Yeah.
What an amazing story. So it sounds like an incredible project. How can people check it out if they want to?
On my site, they can write www.dudipedia.com or on YouTube, Dudi Patimer.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The price of housing in Israel has risen drastically in the last decade, and it's making a major impact on the average Israeli's finances. Yesterday, I spoke with real estate professionals and new immigrants to Israel to find out what they think of the housing market and why they think it's still worth living in Israel. Apartment high-rises like this one behind us are popping up everywhere in Tel Aviv, but the price of housing in Israel is also skyrocketing. We're here to take a look at how this price hike is affecting the average Israeli's ability to buy and rent property. Housing prices across the country have sharply risen in the last decade, and government estimates show that housing prices in Israel as a whole rose 55% from 2008 to 2013, and the price of rent rose 30% during the same period. In Tel Aviv, some apartments have more than doubled in cost since 2007.
It's crazy. I think if you look at the last 10 years, there is at least something like even more than 100% been raising, like it's crazy. Some people will say it's great for the economy, but for us, for the people who's renting the apartments, it's a bit hard.
One of the biggest problems in Israel is that while housing prices keep rising, salaries remain comparatively low. A 2014 Bank of Israel report says you would need 148 months of the average Israeli salary saved up in order to buy a house, compared to 66 months of the average American salary needed in the US.
Usually it's around 60% you need to put up front, and then the rest you get from the bank, which that's exactly what I started to say from the beginning. It's very hard to purchase your first apartment.
I think it's no mystery that it's quite expensive. I spend probably almost half my salary just on rent. Ideally, I'd be living by myself, but given the salary that I make, that's quite impossible. I live with one roommate.
But despite the financial difficulties of buying a house in Israel, the demand for new apartments is actually rising.
You can see on the market that if you have, for example, 5 places for rent, you will have for each apartment 10 to 30 people waiting to come and see the apartment. This is show you just how much demand there is in here.
It's really hard to look for an apartment, and we're considering even looking at other cities outside of Tel Aviv just to find ways to bring down the rent in any way that we can.
I think there's a common Tel Aviv nightmare. Many of the apartments are not renovated, and landlords get away with not renovating because the demand for these apartments, any apartment, is like very large, and they get away with it. Mine is partially renovated.
While the prices of buying and renting property in Israel might not be shutting down the market, they certainly are putting more pressure on young Israelis and immigrants who are looking to buy a house.
Most of the people do see themselves renting an apartment for the longer term.
In Israel, the housing market, it's so difficult to find an apartment. I mean, a lot of Israelis can't even buy their first apartment until they're 50, 55, and that most of the time that's with the help of their family.
Like just regular apartment is like 5 million shekels. Who has 5 million shekels? I think my solution is to marry rich.
Look, we can complain about the prices and everything, but it's the main city in Israel. like New York in the States, which the prices are very expensive over there. And if you want to live next to the beach with the best bars and the best restaurant in Israel and everything, it will cost more. There is no doubt about it.
So although we're spending an arm and a leg for rent, I feel like, especially at our age and in the mid-20s, it's the best place to be.
There are many young people around, always something to do, cafe, bar, beach, park. I don't know, all my good friends are in a 10-minute walking distance, and I feel like that's a dream anywhere else in the world.
So while housing is getting more expensive and Israelis are having to work harder than ever to make it, many say they still think living in the Holy Land is worth the challenge. This is Denise Wood for ILTV. And now for our Hebrew word of the day. Today's word is lachatz, which means stress in Hebrew. Lachatz is definitely a common word in Israel because it can be pretty stressful in the Holy Land. For example, if you're under a lot of pressure, you can say ani meod lachutz, which literally means I'm really stressed. Between all the wars, the desert heat, and the competitive workforce in Israel, there's plenty to be stressed about. But Israelis always try to make light of things, and it's not uncommon to hear Israelis saying, "Tiraga ve'rak tizrom im zeh," or relax and just go with the flow. Because at the end of the day, stress doesn't get you anywhere. Let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Today it's 76 and sunny in Tel Aviv. It should stay the same tomorrow, so get ready for a beautiful and sunny weekend. All right, everybody, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.86 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv, and don't forget to check out our evening update every night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks for watching, and see you tonight.